Beneath 2 kilometers of ancient ice, something valuable is waiting. Not treasure in the conventional sense, but resources so vast and strategically critical that their discovery could rewrite the global order. Antarctica is not the frozen wasteland we imagine it to be. Under that ice lies a continent larger than Europe, rich in minerals, fossil fuels, and freshwater reserves that dwarf anything found elsewhere on Earth. An international treaty keeps it off limits, but that agreement, signed in 1961, was never meant to last forever. It freezes territorial claims, bans military activity, and prohibits resource extraction. Yet it contains no enforcement mechanism, no penalties for violation, and no plan for what happens when the ice melts enough to make access easy. That moment is coming faster than anyone anticipated. Satellite data shows the ice sheet thinning in key regions. Climate models predict that within decades, parts of the continent will become accessible in ways they never have been in human history. When that happens, the question will no longer be whether nations can exploit Antarctica. It will be who gets there first. And that race has already begun. Antarctica was the last continent to be discovered, and for good reason. It is the coldest, driest, windiest place on the planet. The interior temperature can drop to -90 degrees Celsius. Storms appear without warning, winds reach 300 kilometers per hour, and the landscape offers no shelter, no food, no water in liquid form. For most of human history, reaching Antarctica meant almost certain death. The first confirmed sighting happened in 1820, but it took another 90 years before anyone reached the South Pole. Even then, it was considered a feat of endurance rather than exploration with purpose. There was nothing there worth the cost of getting to it. That assumption held for decades. Antarctica remained a place for scientists and adventurers, not governments or corporations. But in the 1950s, during the Cold War, interest changed. The continent became a potential flashpoint. 7 nations had already made territorial claims, carving the landmass into wedges like slices of a pie. The United Kingdom, Norway, France, Australia, New Zealand, Chile, and Argentina all declared sovereignty over sections, some of which overlapped. The United States and the Soviet Union refused to recognize any claims, but reserved the right to make their own. Tension was rising. The possibility of militarization was real. In 1959, 12 countries signed the Antarctic Treaty to prevent conflict. It was a diplomatic miracle, a rare moment when rival superpowers agreed to set aside an entire continent for peaceful purposes. The treaty worked because Antarctica seemed useless. There was no immediate economic incentive to violate it. The technology to extract resources from under the ice didn't exist, and even if it did, the cost would be prohibitive. But the treaty included a critical provision. It didn't renounce territorial claims, it froze them. Countries that had made claims kept them on paper, dormant but not abandoned. The agreement also included a clause allowing for review after 50 years. That deadline passed in 2011, and while no major changes were proposed, the conversation shifted. Nations began talking about what comes next. Meanwhile, science was revealing what actually lies beneath the ice. Geological surveys using radar and seismic imaging found mineral deposits that could rival anything on other continents. Copper, iron, gold, platinum, uranium, coal, and rare earth elements critical for electronics and renewable energy technology. Some geologists believe Antarctica holds more untapped mineral wealth than Africa and South America combined. Then there's oil and gas. Seismic studies suggest the continental shelf around Antarctica could contain up to 200 billion barrels of oil, more than the proven reserves of most OPEC nations. Natural gas reserves could be even larger. For now, extracting these resources is illegal under the 1991 Madrid Protocol, an addition to the original treaty that bans mining and drilling. But that protocol is also up for review, and it only requires consensus to change. If enough nations decide the benefits outweigh the risks, the ban could disappear. China has been the most aggressive. Over the past 2 decades, it has built 5 research stations in Antarctica, more than any country except the United States and Russia. Chinese icebreakers now conduct regular expeditions, mapping the ocean floor and surveying ice-free areas. In 2018, China announced plans to build a permanent airstrip in the interior, a move that raised alarms among other treaty signatories. An airstrip would allow year-round access, something currently impossible for most nations. It would also give China a logistical advantage if the treaty system collapses. Officially, China supports the treaty and insists its activities are purely scientific. But its actions suggest it is preparing for a future where territorial claims matter again. Russia has similar ambitions. It operates 5 year-round stations and has been upgrading its Antarctic infrastructure steadily. In 2020, Russian officials publicly stated that Antarctica's resources would eventually need to be utilized and that Russia intends to be ready when that happens. Australia, which claims the largest territorial slice of Antarctica, has also increased its presence, modernizing its stations and expanding its icebreaker fleet. The United States, which has never made a formal claim, maintains 3 major stations and conducts extensive military-grade surveillance under the guise of scientific research. Every major power is watching every other major power, and all of them are preparing. The geopolitical risk is not hypothetical. In 2016, a leaked diplomatic cable revealed that Chinese officials had discussed the possibility of ignoring the Antarctic Treaty if it conflicted with national interests. The language was vague, but the implication was clear. If China believes it can gain a strategic advantage by claiming territory or extracting resources, international agreements may not stop it. The same logic applies to other nations. The treaty works as long as compliance benefits everyone. The moment one country decides the cost of following the rules exceeds the benefit, the entire system unravels. And there is no mechanism to stop that. The treaty has no enforcement body, no penalties for withdrawal, no military deterrent. It is a gentleman's agreement in a world that no longer operates on gentlemen's terms. Some analysts believe the treaty will collapse within the next 20 years. Others think it could last longer, sustained by the difficulty of operating in Antarctica even as the ice retreats. But no one disputes that pressure is building. The combination of climate change, resource scarcity, and rising geopolitical competition creates conditions where conflict becomes likely, even if no one wants it. What would that conflict look like? Probably not open warfare, at least not at first. More likely, it would start with legal disputes. A nation claims a newly ice-free region, citing historical exploration or geographic proximity. Another nation contests the claim. The matter goes to international arbitration, but arbitration requires both parties to accept the ruling, and there is no guarantee they will. Meanwhile, the claimant begins setting up infrastructure, drilling exploratory wells, or establishing a permanent settlement. Other nations respond by doing the same in their claimed territories. Within a few years, Antarctica could be carved up informally, with each major power controlling a zone and defending it through presence rather than law. The environmental consequences would be catastrophic. Mining and drilling in Antarctica would accelerate ice melt, releasing carbon stored in frozen soil and destabilizing glaciers that currently hold back vast ice sheets. If the West Antarctic ice sheet collapses, global sea levels could rise by 3 meters, flooding coastal cities and displacing hundreds of millions of people. The very act of exploiting Antarctica's resources could trigger the conditions that make those resources necessary in the first place. It is a feedback loop with no exit. Yet the economic pressure to exploit Antarctica is real. Rare earth elements are essential for solar panels, wind turbines, electric vehicles, and smartphones. Currently, China controls over 70% of global rare earth production, giving it enormous leverage over technology supply chains. If Antarctica holds comparable deposits, other nations will want access to reduce dependence on Chinese supply. Similarly, oil and gas reserves in Antarctica could extend the lifespan of fossil fuel industries by decades, delaying the transition to renewable energy but also ensuring energy security for countries that lack domestic reserves. The argument for exploitation is always the same. We need these resources. Other countries will take them if we don't. The environmental cost is regrettable but unavoidable. These justifications have been used to rationalize resource extraction in every fragile ecosystem on Earth, and they will be used again in Antarctica. The difference is that Antarctica is not just another ecosystem. It is a continent-scale regulator of the global climate. The ice sheet reflects sunlight, keeping the planet cooler. The surrounding ocean drives currents that distribute heat and nutrients worldwide. Disrupting Antarctica disrupts everything. The stakes are not regional, they are planetary. Some scientists and policymakers are pushing for a permanent ban on resource extraction, an extension of the Madrid Protocol with no expiration date and binding enforcement. The idea has support among environmental groups and smaller nations with no territorial claims, but it faces opposition from the major powers. Russia and China are unlikely to agree to a permanent ban. The United States has been ambiguous, supporting the treaty in public while maintaining the option to reverse course if necessary. Australia and Norway have expressed support for strengthening protections, but both have strategic interests in Antarctica that could conflict with a total ban. The politics are complicated, and the window for action is closing. If the treaty is going to be reinforced, it needs to happen before the ice melts enough to make exploitation easy. Once infrastructure is in place and economic interests are entrenched, reversing course becomes almost impossible. History shows that nations rarely give up resources voluntarily, especially when those resources are tied to national security or economic survival. The hope is that Antarctica can remain an exception, a place where international cooperation overrides competition. The reality is that such exceptions are rare, and they do not last when circumstances change. There is another possibility, one that involves neither cooperation nor conflict, but something in between. Some experts propose dividing Antarctica's resources through a managed framework, similar to how the deep seabed is governed by international law. Under this model, resource extraction would be allowed but regulated by a multinational body that allocates access, enforces environmental standards, and distributes profits to all treaty signatories, not just those with claims. It is a compromise designed to prevent conflict while acknowledging that total preservation is unrealistic. The challenge is getting every major power to agree to such a system and to trust that others will follow the rules. Trust is in short supply. The framework would also need to address the environmental costs, something that no existing international agreement has done effectively. The deep seabed mining regime has been debated for decades and still hasn't produced a single operational mine, largely because the environmental safeguards required make it economically unviable. The same could happen with Antarctica, where the cost of responsible extraction might exceed the value of the resources themselves. But responsible extraction assumes that responsibility is the priority. And in a world facing resource shortages, that assumption is dangerous. Antarctica represents a test, not of engineering or geology, but of whether humanity can prioritize long-term survival over short-term gain. The resources under the ice are real, and the pressure to access them will only grow as climate change and population growth strain existing supplies. The question is whether we can resist that pressure long enough to find alternatives, or whether we will repeat the same mistakes that have degraded ecosystems and destabilized climates across the rest of the planet. The treaty system offers a chance to avoid conflict, but only if nations choose to uphold it. That choice will be made not by diplomats or scientists, but by leaders responding to domestic pressures, economic interests, and geopolitical fears. And those forces are already pushing in the direction of exploitation. The ice is melting. The resources are becoming accessible. The clock is running. What happens next will determine not just the fate of Antarctica, but the future stability of the entire world. Standing at the edge of the known world, looking out over an ice sheet that has existed for millions of years, it is hard to imagine it gone, but harder still to imagine the restraint required to leave it untouched. We are not good at restraint. We are good at finding reasons why the rules don't apply, Why this time is different. Why we have no choice. Antarctica will test whether we can be different. Whether we can see a resource and choose not to take it. Whether we can recognize that some places are worth more untouched than exploited. The answer will come soon, written not in treaties or speeches, but in the actions of nations when no one is watching.